We'll go from there.
Okay, welcome, everyone. Let me adjust. Okay, closed caption should be on, and you can see it okay? All right, welcome everyone to session 2, Join the Digital Army. This is part 2 of the Disinformation and Social Media Bootcamp. Welcome everybody. Let us know where you're from. We are interested in providing this information to any and all Democrats who will listen. And so we're going to start. Today's presentation is mainly going to be driven by Mark Clapper and Lauren Foley of Indivisible Westchester. I'm just getting us started today with a little itty bitty recap of things that we covered in session 1. And again, it is not required that you see session 1 or that you have seen it before this, but it will help get you motivated. Okay. So I'm just going to cover a few highlights. Okay, so think of session 1 as the why. Why do we want to do this? Okay, so this is a Donald Trump tweet to all of his great keyboard warriors who are better and far more brilliant than anyone on Madison Avenue, in parentheses, ad agencies. There is no one like you. Okay, so that begs the question. So those keyboard warriors are Donald Trump supporters who are active on social media. And so that begs the question, where are Joe Biden's keyboard warriors? And if I'd say there is any single goal to this set of workshops, is that we are trying to help build and help nurture the Joe Biden keyboard warrior team. Okay, we don't have to be keyboard warriors. If we don't like that name, we can be a ninja force for good, okay? But regardless, we need to be out there and amplifying. So just real quickly, part of the reason we're in the mess we're in is that much has changed in terms of how people get information in the last 10, 15 years, okay? Back in the olden days, in 2002, information always passed through a middleman, okay? So you had writers, you had photographers and artists and people, but in order to get their content or their things out to the public, which is on the right side over here, they had to pass through kind of a gatekeeper, a publisher, a curator, right? In order to get your artwork seen, you had to be curated, be in a show or in a museum. In order to get your stuff read, it had to get published, and often that publishing came with a price tag. So there were gatekeepers between the creators of content and getting it out there into the larger public. In today's world of social media, and this is the fancy word, disintermediation, okay, and what that translates to basically is no more middleman, right? So the person creating content, whether it's a video, whether it's an article or a 140-character tweet, can push it out there to the world without any kind of gatekeeping, any kind of curation going on. Okay, initially in the early days of social media, when we could all just publish and read things freely, it was the great democratizer. This was going to make knowledge and information available to all. And it's safe to say, while there is a lot of knowledge and information available to all out there, the honeymoon is over, because there's also a lot of bad information out there. And people, as much as people learned how to use this, they've also learned how to abuse it. So one of the ways we think about abusing it is through disinformation creation. So I think about, and I'm just gonna rush this, okay, so I think about information as having a life cycle, okay, disinformation. So it gets born somewhere, a piece of disinformation content, whether that's in a semi-closed network, like a small group of people, like the Plandemic video was kind of hatched by a smaller group of people, and then it proceeds out into what's known as these conspiracy communities. You often hear of 4chan and 8chan in connection with some pretty bad things. So I think 8chan may actually be down, but the Christchurch shooter, for example, in New Zealand was had written his manifesto and posted, and he was part of a community out there in 4chan. Reddit is another conspiracy community. It's not just a conspiracy community. You can also get like practical tips on data visualization on Reddit, right? But it's where some conspiracy communities live and where it's really easy to create a community. Just recently, the Donald community got taken down because there was so much hate speech and threats of violence, etc. That community had close to 800,000 members. It was just taken down recently. Someone asked me following session 1, do we need to be on Reddit? Absolutely not. We're just saying here where this stuff comes from. Okay, these platforms and social media, this is what we'll be talking about tonight, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and these platform environments, that's often where these disinformation ideas, where these campaigns get out there into the larger world, right? And there are people such as Donald Trump has a huge following on Twitter. So does Joe Biden. He's got 6.9 million followers, I'm seeing. So we want to keep building that up. We want to get more. But, you know, so when people with that many followers, you know, post something, a lot of people get that content and see it, right? And then finally, the last kind of station, the last stop on the bus for disinformation is when it gets out there to professional media, when it's on the news, right? And it's not always a linear journey. Sometimes somebody from a conspiracy community will push something out in social media and then back in their community say, okay, guys, go and amplify this. You have a community of 40,000 people, you can get something out there amplified pretty quickly, okay? When we talk about content amplification, we're talking about candidates, and right now we're really focused on candidates. We've got Joe Biden, and we've also got a lot of local elections going on, or topics, okay? So causes that we care about can also be amplified. In the case of the Reproductive Health Act, which passed by our New York State True Blue Senate, something a lot of us worked hard to get these senators elected so that they could pass this law. And when they did we do anything on social media? No, not really. We were really quiet. The Democratic, our side tends to think, oh, we're on the side of the right and the good. We don't need to go and amplify this. That is not true, because the other side was out there making a ton of noise, right? We were baby killers, etc. And they were getting their stuff out there to the point where CBS News even kind of took some of their text, you know, because it was just so out there in the world of Twitter, and they adopted some of their language mistakenly. They took this down, but for a little while, this was up on New York, on CBS News. New York passes a law allowing abortions up until the baby's due date. The mother's health is at risk. So the distorted facts make it far and wide, right? So then you don't have to be on social media to get this message. And then finally, okay, so this was turning negative attacks into positive. Another thing that the other side, especially, this was a strategy of Steve Bannon's, to flood the zone with stuff, right? To just, in fact, that was his thing. Democrats weren't the problem, it was the media. Flood it with shit and just keep pounding it. But we can also take some of this negative messaging and turn it positive, right? So there's a lot of this sleepy Joe Biden. In fact, that's Trump's nickname for him, right? There's going to be a lot of stuff on Hunter Biden that didn't seem to stick so well, but he's still calling him Sleepy Joe. But how's this? Okay, this is a rebranding of Sleepy Joe, and this is actually a way that we can turn a narrative around, right? So this was actually Joe Biden, who was basically saying, when Joe Biden gets elected, we can finally sleep at night. So that's why we can call him Sleepy Joe. And throwing that right back into Trump's face is the way to go on this. I think this is brilliant kind of rebranding, and we should amplify. One last word from me, and then I'll pass the torch. Just as an aside, you know, intellectual debates with one another on Facebook, don't. You know, we don't have time. We have recently in Westchester seen within some of our groups, what I term eating our young. right? Where we go after each other instead of like fighting what we need to be fighting. For the next 4 months, I know there are many sides of many debates, and there are many shades of right and wrong of every policy imaginable. We that we do not need to go there right now, because if we don't get Trump out of office, none of this stuff matters. So we need to, the Republicans are really good at getting in lockstep and following and saying, okay, we're going to nail this message down. We need to do the same thing for the next, 112 days. All right. We need to keep this message on. We're not going to be changing minds on Facebook with each other. If someone says something appalling, direct message them. Ask them to have a conversation, right? We need to really get the messaging out there. So with that, I pass it to Mark, and I think I stop sharing, and then do you share from your screen, or do you want me to keep going?
Keep going. I'll cue you.
Okay.
All right. Next slide. All right. So this all leads up to the point that we are the digital army. And what do we want to do? This is basic training. I think as Kim just said, we don't want to get in arguments. We don't want to get in their face. But what we want to do is we want to make sure our message gets out there, and our message is spot on and saying the things that we want to say, rather than letting the other side take control of that too. Next slide, if you would. So I have a journalism degree. It's probably old enough that it has expired at this point. But when I was in one of my classes, I think senior year, it was after Watergate, but that was still pretty fresh in everyone's mind. And, big point that the professor made is people need to be active and involved consumers of information. Don't just believe everything you hear and see. And unfortunately, a lot of what has happened is people are very passive. They're sitting there watching the news, watching cable, listening to talk radio, whatever, and whatever they hear, they just believe, because they're not really processing it and saying, well, who is that made, published that quote? Who was the speaker? Where did it come from? And for those who are from the New York area, of course, you recognize Sims, the men's clothiers, where an educated consumer is our best customer. They're not around anymore, but that statement, the first time I heard it, I smiled, because I remembered journalism school. But passivity is no good. You have to be active. Next slide. We'll talk about what that means, if you would. All right. So some of these questions are obvious, but let's talk about this for a minute. What is the source? I mean, there's obviously, sources that we trust or we don't trust. I mean, obviously, if we see something from Breitbart or Daily Caller or worse, we kind of know what that position is going to be, right? Before we even hear what they said. Who is posting the information is critical. And I'm going to talk in a moment about Twitter. The reason that this question is important is it's very common for people, especially on Twitter, which is an abbreviated format, to just make a statement. They will just make, and sometimes it's nothing more than a hot take. It's not even sourced. It's not based on any information. But, if the person that made that statement is, hey, Barack Obama, okay, probably credible. If the person who's making that statement is Joe from Alabama, may not be. So, you got to really be very critical and say, all right, where'd that come from, before you accept, just whatever the person said. What's the poster's history? And this is an important point, actually, on Twitter. Facebook to a lesser degree, but on Twitter, what tends to happen is many folks have now taken this idea of spreading information into their own hands. And what they will do is they will open multiple accounts, and they will often post the same thing almost simultaneously to all of those accounts. This also lets them escape Twitter jail, because if one of their accounts gets shut down, they just go to the next one, and they post the same nonsense on another one of their accounts. So very often you can see that, okay, maybe the handle is the same, but the name has changed 6 times. those kinds of things. Moving on, more importantly, what's the context? It's not unusual, and this is something that the right, not yet, Kim. Go back if you would.
Oh, sorry.
Very often what they'll do is pull one phrase out of a paragraph and then claim that as truth, you know, and they've done this with Joe Biden, trying to claim that he misspeaks and trying to build up this whole, you know, idea that he's too old for the job. But they'll pull a phrase out of a paragraph and say, see, he was talking about climate and he made no sense. So you have to be careful about that. Now, the other thing, the final point I want to make here, it's not unusual when there's an active disinformation campaign going on. You will see practically the identical tweet posted by hundreds of people, almost within minutes of one another. And that's typically bots are doing that, but there's often a lot of human bots too. People that just say, oh, so-and-so posted this, I'll just repost it. We don't want to do that either, but it's important to be a very critical and active consumer of content. All right, next slide. Now you can go forward. So bonus points to anyone who recognizes this as the famous Grateful Dead wall of sound. Pre-digital age, they actually just had hundreds and hundreds of speakers, and they did this for one of their tours. And if you follow the Dead, there's a lot of very cool stories about how they had to put that up and take it down time after time after time. But the idea is you want to take the messages that are positive, you want to take the messages that make the points that really boost your candidate, your cause, your group, and you want everybody working from the same script. That's the basis of amplification. All right, next. Before we get into how to do this on Twitter, I'm going to ask a question here. I didn't really put a poll in, but I'm going to say put it in the chat. Let's see who comes closest to the right answer, and we'll give you credit later. All right, I'll give you a few seconds here. How many people do you think use Twitter in one day? All right, so just put your answers in the chat. I'll give you a couple of seconds more.
We're seeing 2 billion, 3 billion, 100 million.
Whoa.
Boy, they're going fast. 40 million, 3 billion, a trillion.
All right, good to see. All right, go to the next slide. We'll go to the answer, and then we'll come back. Somebody just came very close. It's 166 million people a day. And this information came from Twitter themselves. And the metric that they use, just to give you an idea and a reminder of what's behind all of the social media companies, is monetizable daily average users. Okay, that's how many eyeballs they have to sell to potential advertisers. It's 166 million. The reason I wanted to use this point here is that it also, imagine a stadium that held 166 million people. It just, you know, nobody would ever hear you. It's the equivalent though of going to a baseball game in sold out Yankee Stadium and yelling at the umpire. You know, the umpire can't hear you, right? It just doesn't happen. It's a very noisy place. Not everybody agrees. And that's why it's important to try and learn how to get your message out there, right? And how to respond in a positive way, how to respond in an effective way that's going to help get you followers. It's going to get people reading your message, nodding their heads, and so forth. And that's what we want to talk about today.
Next.
All right, so whoever said 150 million, I did see that scroll up, came close. All right, next slide. So as Kim showed you, this is a win, okay? Somebody took that Time magazine cover and tweeted it. This is what we want to happen. When you see content that you like, we want to, you know, take it, make it your own, and push it back out there. How do we get started? Next slide, if you would. How do we get there? So this is a basic how-to. We can post, I've got some other slides from a prior presentation that we did to another group that we can put in here, and we'll add them to the site and post them afterwards. But getting started, I I always like to tell people, find accounts to follow. You don't have to worry about saying anything if you've never been on Twitter before. Just find people that you like. We've got some accounts on a list we'll share shortly, but could be journalists, could be celebrities. I personally got started following sports writers. And I, had the experience where, I'd be watching something on television and I'd see all these sports writers live tweeting from the press box about what was going on in the game. And, several times I would put up a question or I'd reply to some of them and they would answer me. And I was like, oh, wow, this big shot basketball writer just tweeted to me, and that's really how I got confident. I got comfortable and I got involved. And that's what I would recommend is just find people you like or you're interested in, follow them, read their stuff. You could try liking a tweet, retweet something that you want to share, reply to somebody that you know or that you like, and then eventually you'll get more comfortable and you can start tweeting from there. All right, next. So for the purposes of this group, obviously, we're talking about Joe Biden, and these are the best places to start. They're all Biden or Democrat related accounts. And what you'll see is, if you want to go broader than this list, you'll see who is interacting with these accounts, and you'll see who is, retweeting something that, Joe Biden posted or the Democrats posted. On the right-hand side, those are campaign surrogates. You recognize all of them except probably for the last one. That's TJ Ducklo, who is the press secretary right now. And I would imagine he'll become the White House press secretary if everything works out in November. But he's very good. He's got good, good analysis on pretty much everything that happens with the campaign. A lot of the journalists follow him, so he's a very good follow as well. Hashtags, and we'll talk some more about that. But the Team Joe hashtag is where most of the folks like myself and others who actively tweet on behalf of the campaign use that hashtag. So that's a good place to start. And, you can basically put it into search and you get everything that's been tweeted with that hashtag that comes up, and you can read that and go from there. Hashtag is basically a keyword, if you will, from Twitter in Twitter land. And it's a searchable term. If you use, and I don't really want to talk about this because it can get complicated, but if you use some of the desktop Twitter platforms, you can actually follow a hashtag just like you follow any of these people. But it basically, it's around a topic or around a group of people who are doing something for a common cause. That's basically the way it's typically used. So Team Joe is really the one to go with. Okay, next one. So from there, you yourself want to build a following. And I want to talk about this for a minute because all of these are important points. I've got two examples here, and one of them is Gardeners for Pete and Joe. And we'll talk some more about the significance of that in a moment. But first of all, you want to be active. If you're not posting anything, it's going to be hard to get a lot of followers. There are a lot of folks out there, many of the people on this meeting, if you follow them, they'll follow back, and that's a given. But if you're not liking tweets, if you're not posting tweets, you're not getting seen. And that activity is what gets you more followers. It gets you more engagement. You have to engage. As I said on the previous slide, if you retweet things, if you post replies, if you like tweets, that's all engagement, and that will help bring people to you to follow you. The third point here is be local. And when I say be local, what that really means is remember that, out of that 166 million people, people are more likely to discover you if you post things, in my case, if you post things about Westchester. You know, if I say, hey, you know, Westchester for Biden is doing this, or come to a rally in White Plains, I'm going to get people in Westchester who may not know me who are going to engage with that tweet. So that's important. The next one is also extremely important, and that's why I pointed out the gardeners for Pete and Joe, and also included one of my examples here, is be yourself. The more you can personalize things, the more you can show a little bit of personality there versus just being somebody who's just retweeting campaign stuff all day long, the more likely that people will enjoy following you. One thing that I can say is that if you watch a lot of cable news, which I think most of us do, they all have their regular panelists. They all have, you know, their Molly John Fasts, and they all have their Rick Wilsons, and they all have their Steve Schmitz and whatever. But I will tell you that if you go to any of those people's Twitter and you read their tweets, it sounds exactly like they do on TV. They're being authentic, they're being themselves, right? And that's really what you want to strive for. I know that's hard, and I know that people tend to be shy when they first try Twitter, but I strongly suggest that. If you can get yourself there, just be yourself and say what you'd say. And then finally, use hashtags, because that's how you get your stuff noticed. It's also how people, again, if you know you tag things with Team Joe, which you know I've been asked to do, people find my tweets, people notice my tweets, and I've picked up a lot of followers from the Biden campaign that way. So that's what hashtags do, and we have another slide on hashtags coming up shortly. All right, next. So I'm sure some of the folks in this meeting have had some form of organizing training or been involved as organizers on some level. And a key principle of organizing that a lot of people talk about is you share some personal experience. And in this case, the Twitter version of this, and this was done on Mayor Pete's campaign, and this was phenomenal. It was a huge success. When it was first explained to me, I thought it was great. What they did was they used people's common personal interests, right? You'll see on this page there was gardeners for Pete and Joe, which I already talked about. And again, you'll see that literally that's a gardening post there. I didn't grab all of it, but that's a gardening post. But there's artists for Pete, there's crafters for Pete, there's designers for Pete. These are just 5 examples. There's pets for Pete, which is a great account, by the way. But they share their common interests in their hobbies or whatever it is that they do, but also in their, you know, alliance with Mayor Pete. And they've all come over, most of these folks have now come over to the Biden side, which is great. But that's an idea of finding common interests. Now, when it comes to tweeting, the organizing analogy, the best one that I can make is, let's say you were tweeting about the Affordable Care Act, right? If you were to say something like, you know, my spouse, you know, had stage 3 cancer and lost their job and was able to get the treatment they needed, you know, thanks to the Affordable Care Act, right? And then you know, tacked on whatever article or whatever it is you want to share, that immediately personalizes it, right? That's a technique that, you know, people will tell you to use when you're canvassing community organizers, but that's how you do it on Twitter, and it works. All right, next slide. So let's talk about how to amplify. I know I'm going a little fast here, but there's really good, better, best, like the old Sears Roebuck catalog, right? Good is simply you retweet something or you like something, and that's the top example on the right, where Mimi Roca retweeted Tammy Duckworth, right? And that's, you know, pushes the message. She's giving her endorsement there. Better is you retweet something with your own comment. And the difference between that middle tweet there about Sarah Cooper and the Mimi Roca tweet is Mimi Roca has a huge following. So if she retweets something, it's getting pushed out to a lot of people. But if I retweet something, I've only got maybe a tenth of the audience that Mimi Roca has. So I'm going to put a comment on it, right? So that it gets a little more visibility and potentially engages a few more people. The other thing you can do is reply. In other words, you can put your own little wisecrack or something like that underneath the Sarah Cooper quote. But really the best approach is to add original posts. Find topics that interest you, or take a topic that others are already tweeting about and then just write your own post, right? This is campaign content and I have, written something about it and tweeted it out. So in a nutshell, that's how you amplify. So next slide, if you would. Be human. I talked about this already, but the idea of personalizing the story. How does the topic affect you? What can you say to create a personal connection? The top example here, the reason I keep using the Gardner's for Pete and Joe account, not just that I know the person behind it, but the fact that it's very personal and she is very authentic, right? And and tweets in that way. And that's very engaging. That's what you need to do. My attempt at this underneath, not quite as good. I did this actually on a Biden training when they had us do this as an exercise. But that's my version of it, was, sharing why I was supporting Joe Biden and then putting out that little graphic they gave us to make. But again, don't be afraid to be yourself. All right, next. So this slide was a late addition. I will just tell you the quick background. I was at the dentist this morning and I was sitting in my car waiting to be allowed into the waiting room. And I saw this tweet. And Mark Levin is, right-wing, I think, talk radio dude. Enough said there. But he's claiming this is Obama's hydroxychloroquine from 2008. Well, A, it's not hydroxychloroquine. And B, if you read the label, he's going to an area where there's malaria. So it makes a lot of sense they would give him something that would be anti-malarial, right? But what's the motive here? Let's just recognize this for what it is. It's nothing more than get the base fired up. I mean, personally, I think it makes a statement about who's in the base, if they just take this stuff and just leave it and go. I also think they take some thrill out of making us angry. I think that they like to curry favor from the White House, right? The hydroxychloroquine story is coming back. I saw that the state of Florida, earlier this morning, the state of Florida is requesting like hundreds of thousands of doses of this stuff from the federal government, right? All the stuff the federal government couldn't peddle, Florida wants now. The other thing is sometimes this is done to distract from something else. They want to get us fired up. I just saw something pop up. Somebody said, should we follow Mark Levin? And the answer is no. And go to the next slide. Let's talk about that. Absolutely do not. You want to stay above the fray, okay? I'll walk you through this. This is a Little Don Trump. That's what I call him, Little Don tweet. And basically there was one of Joe Biden's appearances, I believe about a week or 10 days ago, where he said he was proud to be introduced as Joe Biden's husband, right? And of course, that immediately blew up. He said Joe Biden's husband, he's senile, and all that started again, led by the ringleader, Little Don, right? And so, on the top right, Brooklyn Dad is a very active Twitter account. A lot of us follow him. He jumped right in and jumped right on it, right? And there's actually more to his response that I didn't show because this is a polite audience and I won't do that. But he did it. The next one, tried to respond truthfully. And then the bottom, that's Biden War Room, okay, which is part of the campaign. That's one of the accounts I gave you to follow, where they just responded. And I would tell you, if you see these things and you feel compelled to respond, okay, you drop a fact and you leave, all right? That's something that we here in Westchester with our accounts did very effectively. I'm going to talk about that soon. But it just does not pay. Remember that all you're doing when you jump in here is you're just trying to yell louder than 166 million other people. And unless you're somebody who's a big celebrity, you know, Rob Reiner could reply to this tweet probably and get a lot of attention. Somebody who's incredibly creative or witty could probably reply to this tweet. But if you're somebody like me, don't waste your time. I'll tell a quick story that the only time I've ever been suspended from Twitter was for responding to Donald Trump Jr. And it was I believe the first or second Democratic debate when the right started that whole thing about Kamala Harris that started to blow up during the debate. And he jumped in, and I basically, because I was watching the debate, said something like, why don't you just go play in traffic and stay the heck out of our debate? And I got suspended for encouraging self-harm, okay? The only time I've ever been suspended from Twitter. So don't do it. It's a waste of time. Might get your blood pressure up, but what you can do, go to the next slide, is you know, build on what you see. That tweet from the Biden War Room, that's exactly what they did, is they saw what was out there, they saw what was going on, and they just turned it around and made it a positive statement about Joe Biden and Joe Biden. So, but, you know, 3 examples here. This is amplification, right? You know, the one on the top left, you know, Biden made a statement about character. The Women for Biden said, we couldn't agree more. And you'll see the Team Joe hashtag there. The one on the top right, you know, was a thank you to Addie Barkin, you know, for his endorsement of Joe Biden, right? Again, something very human. And then, you know, on the bottom, this was after Lieutenant Colonel Vindman submitted his resignation last week. And, you know, just again, just a restatement of fact, another way to pick up that tweet and just push it along. Think of it that way, that you're picking up a message and just pushing it along. Okay? So let's talk about hashtags. And this is one of the folks in Westchester will remember this well. So we had a 2-term Republican county executive here named Rob Astorino. This is actually what he did before he started showing up on CNN. And he was awful. Just Republican dogma. I pledge not to raise taxes, but you won't get any services either because we have no money to pay for them. And he just let the counties, you know, the county's finances go to pieces and was terrible. So shortly before his election in 2017, came out that he was involved in a potential pay-to-play scandal. Someone had been arrested for bribery in a case in New York City. And for those who don't know, we're about 25 miles from New York City, just a little geography. And the defendant in that case, you know, among other things, had bought a Rolex watch for who else? Rob Astorino. So we gave him the nickname Rolex Rob. And we were chasing him during the campaign. This was toward the very end, and, you know, asking him, what time is it? You know, what time it is. You know, he went shopping with this donor in the Diamond District. That was a proven number of things came out. So fast forward, he's now CNN pundit, as you know. And he's also recently announced he's going to run for office again. He's going to run for the New York State Senate against a, you know, very well-liked, very hardworking, terrific first-term state senator named Pete Harckham, right? We're going to have to work hard because Astorino is a popular guy. He's also very slick, as those of you who've seen him on TV. But we have our superpower here, and our superpower is Rolex Rob. And we have, I would say, probably a couple of thousand tweets, in our archives that we used against this guy in 2017. We were so good at going after him as Rolex Rob. We also called him Disasterino and a number of other things. And we were so good at it that the paid political consultants that were involved in the race at the time told us that it was the social media that made the difference. So done right, hashtags can be very powerful. And now that we've got that little bit of branding in place, we're going to pull it out again. He doesn't know what's coming. He does not know. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about trolls, and then I'll pass it to Lauren.
Next slide.
Next slide, please. All right. So before we get to trolls, the last point I want to make here is, remember, it's social media. And I never really thought of it that way. And I was reading some articles just to put these slides together. And it's the social aspect. This post appeared on HuffPost Politics day after March for Our Lives. And they had pictures of all these dogs at March for Our Lives. And, just in the spirit of full disclosure, my son was working at the Huffington Post on the social media team at the time. And so I texted him and I said, "Oh, I love that post." And his response was, "Animals at liberal marches always does well for us." So, but it's social media and the kinds of things that people would respond to if they saw them in real life, or if you were in a conversation with them in real life, they're going to respond to on social media in a very same way. The only difference is it's anonymous. They don't see you and you can't see them. So you can't read body language and things like that. So sarcasm doesn't play well, things like that. But remember the social aspect of it. I also tell people when you talk about trolls that it's like physics or it's like boxing. If you take a swing at somebody, they're going to swing back. Every action, there's a reaction. So that's why we don't want to argue with trolls. Go to the next slide. Can't say this enough. Should you argue with trolls? No. So let's talk about what a troll looks like on Twitter. Okay. Go ahead. All right. So how do you recognize a troll on Twitter? As I said, they tend to make inflammatory or repetitive responses. And when I say inflammatory, make no mistake about it. They're not disagreeing with you. They're calling you horrible names. They're threatening you. They also some of them tend to make repetitive responses. I have not encountered too many of these myself, but you'll find that it's somebody who obviously, it's just a circular argument. That they'll say something, you'll post a fact, they'll practically repeat the same thing again, right? And those tend to be, I think, the troll farm trolls, to be honest with you. They also tend to have Twitter handles that have lots of numbers in them. Like if you can see the slide on your screen, Cooper has lots of numbers there. There's no profile picture. There's usually penguins in this case. They're often older accounts. You'll see an account that maybe has been around since 2011, but they're following 100 people, right? And if they've been active at all since 2011, they probably should be following several hundred people and have several hundred followers by that point. But those are telltale signs. And so, as we say, don't feed the trolls. They want arguments, they want discord. Just block them and move on. And the way that you do that, if you don't know, is you click the three dots there in the profile, and then that opens up a menu. And in that menu, you can block and report, okay? And sometimes, go to the next slide, when you actually report somebody, Twitter hears you and they do something. I'll just tell you, and I don't say this as bragging, that, I do that. And I think I've gotten to the point, my batting average on reporting people and getting them, penalized now is pretty good. Just because I know what won't fly. And it's simple. Twitter keeps playing around with the reporting process, but I think they're getting a little bit better about cracking down. A little bit. I'll qualify that. So that's the Twitter section, and I will turn it over to Lauren for Facebook.
Thank you, Mark. We are going to try and get through Facebook a little bit quicker because more of us are familiar with the platform. But I want to take you just through some Facebook best practices about how to be an effective member of the digital army. And the first thing I want to say to you is the question comes up all the time. Do we have to do Facebook? We don't like Zuckerberg. We want to get off the platform. Do we have to? Next slide, please. Yes, we have to. Take a really good look at this picture. We don't ever want to see this again. And the only way we can do this is to be a part of this digital army and get busy on Facebook. I know a lot of you are ready to just abandon the platform. I wish I could too, but stay with us through November and let's make sure this never happens again. Next slide. How can you be a part of the digital army on Facebook? It's the same thing for all of the other platforms. Next slide. We want to actually constantly amplify, which means to make something larger, greater, or stronger. We want to amplify the positive messages coming from the campaign, coming from each other. We want to amplify the videos that we're seeing. We want to make sure more of our friends are seeing them. And I'm going to take you very briefly through how to do that. Next slide. So just so we're all clear on some language with Facebook, when we talk about our news feed, we're talking about really your home on Facebook when you scroll through and see the pictures of your friends' babies or grandparents or their great vacation. That's called your news feed. And at the very top of your news feed, which is mobile on the left and your desktop on the right, you'll see what's on your mind, Lauren. And that's where you post. So just so we're clear on language, it's your news feed and you're posting. And then to post to your news feed is where things will show up for your friends. We're not talking about posting into groups at the moment. We're talking about posting on your news feed. I'll talk about groups in just a minute. Next slide, please. Amplifying a post. Now you can't talk about the internet without talking about cats. So here's some cats for you. Liking a post is really sweet. It's the cutest little thing. Save it for the babies and the vacations and the grandparents and you did a great workout. Yeah, like the post, love the post, whatever. But like a kitty, it has no teeth. It really doesn't do anything for the post or for amplifying. What you really need to do is comment and or share on a post that you want to amplify. That's where the teeth are. Next slide. So I'm not even going to talk about the kitty cat. You get it. You like the babies. They're really cute. We're going to talk about commenting. The Facebook algorithms like comments and will make a post more visible for its followers and for some of your friends. So if I comment on a post, there's a really good shot that that post, even if Mark doesn't follow that newspaper or something along those lines, it will show up in his news feed. And at the very top, it will say, Lauren commented on this. So I'm actually making things show up in my friends' news feeds. Now, if you really know your privacy settings, you know how to stop some of that stuff. But for the most part, people aren't great at their privacy settings. And so your posts, your comments will start showing up more in their feeds. Okay, a couple of really important points. Because commenting on anything makes a post more visible, the algorithm will help it show up more for people. Please only comment on posts you agree with, people, candidates, or posts you support, or other digital army posts, especially your friends. If your roommate from college starts posting about Biden, comment on it. boost that post. That's what we want to see. And then all of your other college friends will start seeing the two of you are boosting Biden, and then they'll get in on it. Okay, please do not comment on anything you don't agree with, support, or like. I know we want to rage on Mitch McConnell's Facebook page. We want to go into one of his posts and just release all of the anger that we have. And as soon as you do that, Facebook will say, oh, this post is popular. Let's make it show up even more. And some of your friends will see that you commented on it. And then all of a sudden, Mitch McConnell's posts are being amplified by us. We don't want that. We only want to amplify what we agree with. If you get into an argument on Facebook, as much as it sometimes feels good, it's actually doing damage to the goal that we have. So please don't argue. Please don't comment on anything you don't agree with. Next slide. Sharing. Sharing, just like on Twitter where you retweet, you want to share a post that you agree with, a great video, a great Occupy Democrats meme, something that just kind of gets you excited about the election. The first thing you should do is click on the word share, and then this menu will come up. Don't worry about what the other options are. You just say something about it and then click share now. Just like on Twitter, instead of just retweeting, it's always great to say something. It personalizes it. It helps you become more connected to it, and the algorithms like that. And so it shows up more also. And then you click share now. Somebody just asked about reporting false posts on Facebook. You can. Facebook makes it really challenging. And if you know your Facebook well and you know where the 3 dots are, you can find it in there. But the best thing to do, like Kim is saying, is just ignore it. Next slide, please. Should you share into a group? I guess I will say this, it depends. For the most part, it is your echo chamber, right? The groups that you're in. Indivisible Westchester's group is a great group of people who are all sharing the same anti-Trump, pro-Biden content back and forth to each other. And that's great. And sometimes you want to feel that I'm right feeling. There are a couple of reasons why you should post into a group. And the next slide, we'll talk about that. Yes, share into a group if the group members will also share your content. If you think that it's a group of people who are going to take that content and go back to their news feeds and share it, then absolutely share into it. Some people might not know how to share out of a private group, in which case you're going to have to put in the content of your post how to share out. And I'm going to go over that really quickly next. If it's an action item, an event, or other crucial information that could activate people, then yes, share it into a group. We share into our Indivisible Westchester group events that are happening, postcarding parties, phone banks, because these are active people and these want to get activated. If you have a great meme, I don't really know if sharing it into a private group is the place to put it, unless you have already shared it on your own newsfeed. Sharing it on your own newsfeed is how the people you went to high school will see it. It's how the people you used to work with will see it. It's how the people who you met when you were on vacation on a cruise, 10 years ago will see it. It's your newsfeed where you want to be posting things. And then if you want to post into a group, because it's a great meme and everybody in your group will like it, go for it. Next slide. How do you share out of a private group? I'm going to go over this really quickly, mostly because Mark and I admin a really large group that's private, and people are constantly saying, how do I share this out of this group? Okay, there are 3 ways you can do it. You can go to the original post that somebody's sharing in. For example, here I shared the Lincoln Project. And so what you would do is click on that original post that I shared, and then the share button will show up. You know you're in a private group because the share button is gone. That's how you know. So you have to go to the original post to share. Next slide, please. Option 2, if somebody shared an article, like say from the New York Times, you go to the actual article by clicking on the link, and then you click the 3 dots at the top of the article, you copy the link, and then you paste that link into a new post on your newsfeed, not in the group. You have to go home again to your newsfeed and paste the link. and then you can say something about it there, right? So we want to get these things out of these groups onto your news feeds. Next slide, please. Option 3, somebody posts a screenshot of a tweet or some other meme that you think is funny or you want to share onto your news feed. You can actually just save the photo to your phone or to your computer by holding your thumb on the photo, and then this menu will pop up. You save the photo, and then you go to your news feed again and create a new post and load the photo there. So this is how you get things out of a group onto your newsfeed. Next slide, please. I know we're going a little fast, but you will have access to all of these slides, okay? Making your own posts, just like on Twitter, it's great to create your own content if you have time, if you know what you're doing. But here's what I'm gonna tell you. You can do just text, you can do graphics, or you can do videos. The one all the way on the right, as you can see from the little sound on, sound off key, is a video. And I know these are very small and hard to see, but the post on the left with the kitty cat has 714 shares. The post in the middle has 2,000 shares, and the post on the right has 23,000 shares. Video will always show up more for people, always, always, always. Graphics will show up more for people. If you just post text, there's a really good shot that somebody's thumb is much faster and they're gonna scroll right past your post. So please add a picture or add a video. Next slide, please. Where do I find things to share? So here's a short list of places to start. Joe Biden's own actual page, which is on the upper left side. Westchester for Biden, Women for Biden 2020, Occupy Democrats, The Lincoln Project, 11 Films, Riding for Biden. Now, one key trick that I will share about video in particular is that often people will share a video and you have to click on the YouTube link to watch the video, where other people seem to be able to have video playing right there in their posts. It's always good to get the content from the platform where you plan to post. So don't go to the Lincoln Project on YouTube to share on Facebook. Go to the Lincoln Project on Facebook and click share from there. They load up their own videos to play, and when you click share, the video will play in your feed. People don't like to click out of Facebook. They like to stay in there. So you want to make your videos play in your feed, and to do that, you have to go directly to the content on that same platform. Next slide, please. Okay, so Instagram. And I know you probably have a lot of Facebook questions, and we are going to get to Q&A in a few minutes. A lot of my friends are saying, oh, I'm not on Facebook anymore. I don't like Mark Zuckerberg. I'm on Instagram instead. Instagram is owned by Facebook. So that's great, but you're still supporting Mark Zuckerberg. I'm going to go just a couple of slides on Instagram. Instagram is, you know, useful. There's a lot of people on there. A lot of younger people are on there. It's a little bit trickier to amplify. So I'm just going to give you a couple of quick basics. Next slide, please. Okay, there's a couple of different kinds of posts you'll see on Instagram. You'll see people posting events. On the left, you'll see people will take screenshots of an article, and then they will post that screenshot or photo of an article because it's really hard to link to things on Instagram. And then on the right, you'll see that somebody just took a photo, and actually Indivisible Westchester did, and posts the photo itself. So those are the three main types of things that you're going to start to see on Instagram. Next slide, please.
Oops. Thanks. Sorry.
So there are three things that you can do with an Instagram post. You can like, you can comment, you can share it to your story or in a private message. And you can do something that's called repost. If you are an Instagram user already and are familiar with the platform, you can download an app called Repost, which is a great way to play with how to just repost directly somebody's content. But that, again, for people who are used to Instagram. And so I'm just going to talk to you about these two other things that you can do down here. Next, please. So this little paper airplane is what you use to share to what's called your story. And a great way to share content on Instagram is just to put it in your story, which means you see a great post and you just click the little paper airplane, and then it asks you if you want to put it on your feed or your story, and you just put it on your story. And what does that mean? Next slide, please. It means at the top of the screen, your profile picture will have a red or rainbow circle around it, which tells people that you have something on your story, and they click on that circle, and then whatever you shared shows up in sort of a slightly longer format on your story. Sharing on your story is a great way to just give people a little taste of something. You can share as much as you want. It's a great way to amplify stuff. People who want to and know how to use Instagram can click into that post. They can click right on your story and go into that post and see more information. Instead of filling your own personal feed, which is trickier to do on Instagram, just throw it up on your story at any time. And you can also comment on posts that you like as well. That's just some basics on Instagram. We really want you to focus on Twitter and Facebook in particular when we're talking about amplifying for the coming election. But if you are an Instagram user, go for it. I do it all the time as well. Next slide. Okay, so TikTok. Now this is very new for most of us. But I wanted to just show you what the screen would look like. So if you do in fact decide to dip your toe into TikTok, or if you have teenagers in your house like I do, and you want to see what's going on, I'm going to show you just a couple of bits of TikTok. TikTok is what I would think of as early YouTube, where people were just creating content of their own imagination and putting it up. TikTok does it in a very simple, very quick video format where you just scroll with your thumb. You swipe up, you swipe up, you swipe up to the next TikTok, and you can just keep on swiping. Next screen. So these are screenshots of a TikTok. On the left, it says me downloading TikTok just to check it out. 6 minutes later, and then TikTok takes over my life. Now, there are a lot of us who were in quarantine who discovered TikTok, and I'm guilty of that. I spent a lot of time scrolling, swiping up on TikTok, and it was highly entertaining. I will tell you that, and you can kind of get lost. But let me just show you some basics. Next slide. There is a lot of Biden content already on TikTok that you can amplify. To amplify on TikTok, you have to have an account because you can't follow or like or comment on a TikTok without an account. You can set up an account. You don't have to put a picture. You don't have to put your name. Just create the account. And then on the right-hand side are your controls. You press that little plus sign to follow somebody, the heart to like it, the 3 dots to comment, and then the arrow to share. Now, sharing on TikTok is not the same thing as sharing on Facebook. So I wouldn't worry about that unless you want to share it by sending it to somebody. So you click on that arrow and it brings up text messaging, it brings up Facebook, it brings up Instagram. So you want to think of it that way. At the top of the screen where it says following and for you, those are your only 2 options. So you can scroll through what's called the For You page, which is basically what the algorithms has decided you would like based on the other things you have already liked. And then there's the following. You click on that and you just see the accounts that you've followed. If you go into For You, like I did during quarantine, and you start to like all of these pro-Biden TikToks and Black Lives Matter protests, then your feed will end up being filled with Biden and protests. And that's great. Then I can just like everything and I can comment on it and I can follow it. This post in particular, it says Gen Z voting in 2020, Trump or Biden, Biden voting for Biden, even though you don't like him. And this TikTok is actually playing to a Hamilton song, which you can tell from the circle on the bottom right. So that's just a really brief taste of TikTok. We don't want to go too deep there. We really encourage you to focus on Twitter and Facebook, a little bit of Instagram if you're familiar. There's some questionable things about TikTok. I find it highly entertaining, but again, that's up to you. Next slide, please. So this we get often asked how often should you be posting on all 4 platforms? Facebook, feel free to post once a day. If you start posting 5, 6, 10 times a day on your newsfeed, chances are your friends will hide you. And you will notice that you will get less comments and less likes on your posts. Once a day is plenty. Try not to repeat your content over and over again on Facebook. They don't want to see it. But comments on any and all posts as much as you want. Comments all day long on things that you like and see on your friends' posts, on Joe Biden content, on Westchester for Biden content. Absolutely. And really on Facebook, if somebody likes or comments on one of your posts, reach out to them, DM them, say, hey, I noticed that you liked my post on Biden, interested in phone banking. You know, you can actually sort of do some relational organizing that way. For Twitter, you can tweet and retweet as much as you want. As you know, there's so many people on Twitter that the chances of the same people seeing your same tweets over and over again are very low. So keep tweeting. You can repeat content. You know, Indivisible Westchester often throws up a couple of the same tweets during a week to make sure that it's hitting as much the audience as possible. And comment as wanted, whenever you feel like you want to reply. For Instagram, I recommend once a day as well. Again, people will mute you or hide you. You can repeat content on Instagram, and you can actually share to your story as often as you want. You can share 100 posts a day if you want to your story. It just reads differently on Instagram. And again, you can comment as much as you want. Again, TikTok, I'm not saying you have to do it or not, but feel free to go crazy, whatever you want to do. It's kind of a new world on TikTok. And so, you know, you can like things if you want to. But the one thing I really encourage you on Facebook is to try and keep yourself to once a day on the posting. I know we've all have friends who are oversharers on Facebook, and it's hard and it's frustrating because you comment on their stuff once and then your feed is just filled with that same person over and over and over again. So choose good content, choose positive content, and share once a day, or share just a few times a week, even if you want to. Get up in the morning, have your coffee, find a good post to share, and then you're done for the day. Next slide, please. So we want to leave you with just our key points. This is a wonderful quote. Change will not come if we wait for some other person or if we wait for some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. Nobody is going to come to our rescue. We have to do it ourselves. We have to win these elections. We have to get these candidates out there. We have to amplify the material and the content. So a couple of really just key points. Focus on the platform that you're most comfortable using. If the Twitter stuff was hard for you to process and digest, stick with Facebook. If you just can't stomach Facebook and you like to tweet, focus on Twitter. We would rather you focus on the platform you're most comfortable with and become more effective than kind of muddling around on everything. Always check before you share. Please don't just click share. Click into it, see what it is, make sure it's real, make sure it's truth, make sure it's meaningful, and don't feed the trolls. We can't say this enough. Don't argue on Facebook, don't argue on Twitter, don't argue on Instagram. It does nothing but amplify bad material. Nobody has ever won an argument on Facebook. Just don't even bother. And again, it is up to us to be the digital army. We are the ones that have to be there. We have to be out there and we have to be amplifying Joe. We have to be amplifying Mark Kelly. We have to be amplifying Amy McGrath. We have to be out there winning these elections, and we can do this.